There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
I would like to welcome back for his second appearance on Bite Size Book Chats, Alex from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Welcome back, Alex.
Hi, nice to be back.
It's so great to have you here. And before we get into the very special book we're going to talk about, you have a special podcast to tell us about.
Yeah, so I am on the editorial board of the Hamilton Review of Books, and I joined specifically so we can start a podcast. And it's going to be a 1-hour podcast, hopefully once a month. We're trying to figure out the schedule, and I'll be interviewing someone, ideally from Hamilton or the area. The first half hour is going to be talking about, people's speeding lives and what interests them in books, and maybe some literary criticism stuff. And then the second half, we're going to focus on a specific book that whoever the guest is. So our first episode will hopefully come out at the beginning of October, and the book we're talking about is Miriam Toews' new book.
Oh, wonderful.
Fight Night. Yeah.
Wonderful. That my pre-ordered copy is winding its way to me. And you liked that book?
I did a lot. Very different. It's a lot. Like, obviously, she continues dealing with some of her themes of mental illness, which are prominent. It's a lot more comedic than some of her other books. And I know she has humor, but this is a comedy. It's a road trip movie, and so it's fun.
Very good. Well, we are here to talk about a book that's got even more buzz than that, and that
I know.
Sally Rooney's latest, Beautiful World, Where Are You? And you gave it 4 stars, so I am very eager to hear why and what you thought.
So obviously, Rooney's probably a very divisive writer in many respects.
Marmite writer.
Yeah, and I think LitHub said it was the most reviewed book they've ever had since, because they have their bookmarks page, and they said since they started up, it's the most reviewed book.
I think it must be the most reviewed book on Goodreads and BookTube and everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like Rooney, although I'm a little older than her. I guess she's just 30 and I'm in my early 40s. So I think in some respects I feel a little separated with her characters, because they are always in their mid to late 20s. I guess normal people, obviously, it's even younger, because the romance starts when they're teenagers.
Right.
I loved Normal People, though. I thought it was a great romance, and it's definitely one of those books that everyone's like aching about the decisions that the two leads make. I haven't seen the show yet, though. I heard the show was done quite well. But when I read the other one, what's her other one, Conversation with Friends, I did feel a bit ironically, I felt prudish sometimes when reading, because Rooney obviously talks a lot about sex and has very graphic sex scenes in it. Also, some of the concerns of her characters are concerns that I no longer have necessarily, right? Because I'm at a different stage in my life. But I also find she's a wonderful writer. I think she exemplifies this kind of more spare style of like not having overly ornate prose, and her conversations, her dialogue is so witty, so hilarious, and all that is there in her new book. It's Beautiful World, Where Are You? I think that's it, without a question mark. So I shouldn't have raised my tone at the end there. In terms of a bit of a plot, it follows 4 characters, 2 women, 2 men, and same things, kind of relationships that happened. And one of them is this woman named Alice, who's a bit of a stand-in for Rooney, because she's an author who's had all this success with her 2 first books, but also like has kind of broken down mentally, dealing with all the fame and all the pressures of fame. And you can tell, I think Rooney has had some of those things. I think she's moved to a smaller town. She doesn't like doing many public events. Although her publisher doesn't seem to mind doing tons of public events, but herself personally, she's more, I don't think she's into that element of being a celebrity author. So that's Alice is the stand-in for her, but also dealing with problems of her relationships in the contemporary world. But also, and I think other people have commented this, and I think this is one of the reasons I'm attracted to Rooney a lot, is like obviously her politics everyone talks about her politics. She identifies herself as a Marxist, and she very much is interested in looking at the anxieties, I think, of her generation as this on the verge of civilization collapse. All the environmental problems, all the economic and social breakdown that we've witnessed in the last 15 years. She doesn't like hammer your head over it, right? But clearly in this book especially, there's a lot of emails and
the emails are causing quite a sensation, and people either love them. I've never heard that anybody hated them, but they really work for some readers. Brandon Taylor, the gay Black American novelist, loved the emails, I think, more than anything else in the book. And the bookish podcasts from Australia, Books on the Go, they weren't so sure about the emails, but they loved the rest of it. So,
I liked it. I thought it was good. Sometimes it gives you... It feels a bit antiquated because I don't know how many people still use emails in that kind of way.
That's kind of funny, but that it's such a hip modern novel, but in fact, email is passé.
Yeah, for sure. Right. But I also, to a certain extent, I felt a little nostalgic because I remember the early 2000s and mid 2000s where you would have these long philosophical or political discussions via email communication. And I still have a couple of friends that I still do that with. So I kind of liked it. And I kind of understand in the context of the two characters that write to one another, they're old friends. Maybe this is the kind of form of communication that they've always had
and continue.
Her novels aren't exactly plot driven. Normal People is a little more, but in general it's a very contemplative novel. It's kind of focusing on the problems of how relationships interact with one another in this world, dealing with social class differences among the two individuals. It's against a common theme also we see in Normal People. I liked it a lot. Her writing's amazing. I'm not sure if it's her best book. I don't think I loved it as much as Normal People on a visceral level. And I'd also be interested to see what Rooney does next, because she obviously, look, there's lots of writers that write the same book over and over again, and they're just looking at different, and they do it well, right? And they're really hammering home at the themes. I would be interested to see, is she ever the kind of writer who's going to try to look beyond the millennial angst of the current period? Will she ever explore historical fiction or other things? Because she obviously has the skill as a writer, but maybe she has no interest. We'll see.
Oh, two questions. One, does COVID make an appearance, or is it pre-COVID?
I think there might be some allusions to it, but they're also traveling across Europe at times because the Alice Goes to Book Festival. So I don't think it's a huge element there. Yeah.
And any thoughts on the title, especially the absence of a question mark?
Yeah, I know, it's so weird, but I do kind of understand I think there's a line in it where they, there's this anxiety, but there's also this appreciation for the beauty of our species and of our humanity and the world we're in. And I think Rooney, in some respects, wants a world that celebrates that more or values that more. And I guess a lot of the anxieties of her characters are that we don't live in that world that truly embraces the beauty of the world outside of it. So that's just my little theory about it.
So Alice is the Sally Rooney character.
Yes.
And she meets a guy from a warehouse, Felix, and they get involved. I don't want to do any spoilers, but they get involved. So
pretty quickly, yeah.
The slut in me wants to know: is it as sexually exciting as Normal People was?
I think even more so. And
okay,
she does sex well. I give her credit in terms of, and I think that's part of the attraction. Maybe too much so. I saw Eric Anderson, I think, posted on Twitter, because I guess he went to go see her speak when she did her big event. And I guess someone asked her, the interviewer asked her a question: is a socialist novel possible? And the person next to Eric just went on his phone and ignored the whole conversation until they started talking about sex, and then he put his phone down. So I think
that sounds like me.
So people are obviously attracted to Rooney for different reasons, and I think that's probably why her audience is pretty broad. There's people who like the sex, there's people who like the romance, there's people who like the politics, there's people, I kind of like all of it.
And I want to add to my very glib comment about enjoying the sexual aspect of Normal People, that there was also a lot about, very dark aspects of sex and wounding through misogynistic blah, blah, blah. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the energy between the two main characters, which was wow.
Yes.
Do you have the same favorite edition, or in Canada?
They do have the same edition, but I did listen to it because I got an advanced listening copy from Libro. And so I'm
Is
on
the
their
audiobook
advanced
good?
listening program. It's great. Yeah. It's wonderful to hear someone in an Irish accent narrate a book. So no,
I
it's
just
very
noticed the end papers. So is there any
I know
meaning
they're
behind-
wonderful, huh? Yeah,
Is there any meaning between the apple on the table in the corner?
Oh God, I hadn't thought about that. No, yeah. I know someone, I saw someone on Twitter not like the design, but I thought the design was great.
It's quite fabulous. Look at that. There's the back.
Everyone made fun of the promotional material, the hat, the tote bag.
Separate shop set up in bookstores or next door.
I know, and I guess they sent some people the box, the promotional kit with all these kind of goodies in it, and the tote bag is great. I would totally do something for that tote bag.
Well, I can't wait to try it, and I thank you very much for helping me out, Alex.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
I'm looking forward to checking out your podcast and put a link to about all that in the show notes for people to check out. And we already have another book lined up, so we're going to have you back as soon as you finish that other book.
Yeah, I'm about a quarter way through. So
take your time. Yep.
I will.
Thank you so much.
Fabulous. Thank you.
I am excited to welcome my new friends via Instagram, Annie from Montreal. Welcome, Annie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great that you agreed to come on. So you're going to talk about a book that you wrote a really fascinating review of. There it is, The Masochist by Katja Perat, translated from the Slovenian by Michael Biggins. So this is a Slovenian novel, recently published. I think it's quite recently published.
It came out in English last year.
The translation is new in English last year, and it's not a book that I'd ever heard of before. What made you pick it up, Annie?
Yeah, this is actually a great question. I met the author at a conference. So I recently graduated from an MA in history from the University of Toronto. When I was studying, I organized a conference there for grad students. And the first person to submit a paper was a PhD student from the US, and her name is Katja Perat. And turns out she's actually from Slovenia, and she's a poet and a writer, and she had written a novel. So this conference was in 2018. So at the time, her novel was not in English. But her paper was just so good that I figured out her novel must be just or even better. And then this month on Instagram, one of my favorite bookstagrammers has been promoting this ex-Yugoslav read along.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit. What is the hashtag?
It's ex-U-Lit, so ex-Yugoslav literature.
Oh, that's what it means. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
And it turns out August is also Women in Translation Month.
I was just gonna ask you if you had read it for Women in Translation Month.
It's the perfect moment to pick this up.
That's right. So this is a very complicated plot. Tell us a little bit about what the book is about, Annie.
Okay, so the plot is not super complicated. Actually, it is mostly a character-driven novel. So it's mostly about the character. Her name is Nadezhda. She is the daughter of an Austrian writer called Leopold von Sacher-Masoch, who, this writer is a real person.
The writer is a real person, and can you pronounce his name again slowly so everybody can catch it? Because it's a really tongue twister.
Leopold von Sacher-Masoch.
So because you're pronouncing it correctly, people aren't going to catch why he's famous, because his name inspired something that everybody knows about. S&M, masochism. Masochism comes from his surname.
Yeah.
And he was kind of into that, apparently, or certainly wrote about it in his...
He wrote about it, and he actually, this is all explained in the book.
Yeah.
He actually hated to be associated with that word.
I saw that on his Wikipedia page. It was the sexologist von Kraft-Ebing that you coined the name, and this guy was not very happy. The story it opens in 1874, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. The daughter is fictional.
Yeah, the daughter is fictional. She did not exist. I'm not an expert in the life of this author. I I didn't really know about him at all. That's another thing that I wanted to mention.
I had never
Like,
heard of him. Didn't know that was the origin of.
Yeah, no one has to be like an expert or like even know anything about him to know,
to enjoy it,
or to like enjoy, or like even understand the book, or like actually like it. Everything you need to know is like more or less explained. Like I guess if you read a little on like the Wikipedia page, or like do a bit of research, but like you don't have to become an expert on the life of Sacher Masoch to understand the novel. The main things are like how his name is fire. That's for like this concept of masochism, but also how like his actions and affected family dynamics, and how that affects the life of this fictional character, Nadia.
I believe I understood maybe from your review that the father is not a big presence in the novel. Like doesn't have a lot of screen time, if I can put it that way. It's mainly about the daughter.
Yeah, it is mostly about daughter.
What does the plot focus on? Is it an intellectual journey, a psychological journey, all of the above, politics?
It's mostly psychological.
Yeah.
So one of the things is that Nadia, she gets a lot of pressure to like fit in and like respond to like pressure from society, like act in sort of ways. Leopold really, he longs for Vienna, or for Austrian Europe, but mostly like this idea of living in Vienna. So when Nadia gets the chance of getting married into someone from the Viennese elite, Leopold is like, yeah, go for it. Yes, of course. And she gets there and she's like living the life that she's just supposed to have, like the best possible life she could have. Like she's living the dream basically. And she is so unhappy and she doesn't understand why. And the fact that she is so unhappy then obviously affects her marriage with like this person of the elite.
I guess there's some famous historical figures that show up in the story. Is it Freud?
Yeah.
Freud?
Yeah, Freud is actually very important in the story. And you'll see it because the story is written in kind of like a journal memoir sort of way. So psychoanalysis actually plays a big role in the story.
How would you describe the tone? I see in the blurb from the publisher, it's called a serio-comical fictional romp through the Habsburg Empire. So was it funny?
It was really funny. Her name, Nadia, means home. I know, like in Russian and Ukrainian, I believe. Like she's of Ruthenian origin, so like Ukrainian.
Right. I guess it's now what is now Ukraine, right?
Ukraine, yeah.
I've actually never seen that adjective before. Serio-comical. I guess the serio means serious. Serious comical. What does that mean? Serio. SERIO. -comical. I've never heard it. It must mean serious comical.
Yeah,
so it's a blend of serious and funny.
Serious and funny, because it is very serious in the way that it rises like really good points about like history, about like the condition of women, about like expectations of society and like what people think, and like this idea of like what everyone thinks affects the way you act. But it's also really funny in like the observation that certain observations of the way that it's written. And
it's just over 200 pages, so not a long one. You gave it 4 stars. Was there anything about it you didn't like, Annie?
The only thing that at the very beginning, I thought it was a bit slow. Okay. At first, I was like, I'm not very sure where this is going. But like, at some point, it just it clicks and it was just great.
So I'm going to put a link to your review, which is on Instagram, because you go into a lot of detail and it's a great review, which is why I invited you on here so people can look that up. Thank you for coming on. I hope you'll come back, Annie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Here for her second appearance on Bite Size Book Chats, but she was living in Canada way back 5 weeks ago, and now she's living in Crete, on the island of Crete in Greece. Mikiko, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Wow. So how's life on Crete?
It's It's very hot and very sunny, but beautiful weather, very dry, unlike the humidity in Asia. I'm sure that you're feeling.
The humidity wave it's broken, so it's little bit cooler in today. So happy about that.
Good.
But
Good.
you're not just visiting Crete for a week or something. You're there for about a year, you think?
Yes. Yeah, probably for a year, just trying to get settled somewhere in Europe. So yeah, with my partner who's here. So he's European. So yeah, we're hoping that we can stay here for a year.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
that's amazing. It hasn't slowed your reading down, I don't think.
No.
And you have recently read a novel published in 1950 that I didn't know anything about, and it really caught my eye. It is called The Feast by Margaret Kennedy.
Yeah.
And tell us about it.
It's about a whole host of characters who live and work and visit this hotel. It's in Cornwall, and it's taking place a few years after World War II. So you've got a different assortment of people who have different sorts of feelings about the war and whatnot, and different levels of involvement. And they all kind of come together, and you just see a whole, I don't know if it's a clash. Some of the relationships are clashes. Some of them are friendships. Some of them are romantic relationships. Some of them are quite tumultuous. But it's really interesting to see this group of people come together, and it's quite a large cast of characters. So if you are not interested in reading about 10, 15 plus people or characters, this probably isn't for you.
How many pages is the book? Now you did the book, you did it on audio, didn't you?
I did it on audio. And I don't, so the narrator is Colin Mace, and he's a really good narrator. What I found with the narration was just a bit too slow. I ended up listening to it, I believe on 1.4, which I realize is a bit fast, but it's actually almost 11 hours. So it cut it down to about 1.5 times.
I see the paperback is 450 pages. So it's not a short book.
No.
I believe that it opens rather dramatically. What's the opening premise?
Does. So you have a gentleman named Reverend Bott, and he is recounting to his friend, another reverend, about a disaster that's happened, whereby a cliff has fallen and it's crushed the hotel. So where all of these people are living and working and staying. And so of one person who has died right off the bat. So, it's not a mystery. That's not a spoiler that this happens. But you read the whole story after hearing about this disaster, and you're wondering, well, who has died? Who has survived?
Oh, so you don't know that everybody, I thought you would know it. I thought that everybody died. So not everybody died. So that's part of what keeps you turning the pages.
Yes. So 7 people have died. One person from the outset, and then you're kind of guessing who the other 6 are. And it's interesting because I did do some follow-up reading because I wanted to hear what other people had said about it, because I just happened to hear about this book when I opened up an email that I received from Faber, and I was reading the synopsis, and I thought, oh, this sounds really great, like a nice summer mystery. It's, this is going to be great. But it is definitely not mystery. It's definitely more character study, which is fine.
Well, and that's why I'm here.
That's perfect. Yeah.
I don't read mysteries. I don't like mysteries. This has a mysterious element, but it's not who did it. We know who did it.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So what I read was that the characters who die are personifications of the 7 deadly sins. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I did read on a blog that the characters who pass away are the 7 deadly sins personified, but that also Kennedy had written this loosely as a short story prior to, and it was published. And then she built off of that. And it was a conversation she was having with friends. They were talking about what the 7 deadly sins would look like personified. She goes away, writes the short story. And then, lo and behold, a bit later on, the book comes about as a result. So
I scanned this blog entry. I'll put a link to it. It's from I think it's a blog called The Idle Woman. And I didn't read too much of what she said about the 7 deadly sins, but by making that analogy or whatever it is, allegory, do you feel like the author's blaming people for, or having these people deserve their deaths?
Well, you find out that they're not likable characters. There are very dislikable characters that you come to almost loathe at certain points. You do have a whole host of adults who do represent or do have traits that do embody, the seven deadly sins. And they really are quite terrible people in the way that, they actually treat others by, things like their greed, like their laziness and their lust and whatnot. So it does affect the other characters. If it was just them behaving that way and it was just them living that way, I think it would be one thing, but it does affect the other characters in the story quite profoundly.
Now, I think you said at the beginning it's a character-driven novel.
It is.
But so do you get invested in any of the characters? Do you have somebody to root for? You have somebody to root for?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that sounds great.
Yeah. You have characters of all ages. You do have some children. You do have some younger people who are, about to embark on post-secondary education, getting jobs. They're all at different points. And I do think you get people who are on the precipice of something changing in their lives. I mean, not just because of the accident, but also because, they are at points where they're kind of ready to do something else. So you do have couples struggling in their marriages for reasons that I think would still hold water today. Difficult parent-child relationships. You have romantic relationships. And so it is quite deep. You have friendships forming or kind of falling apart. You do get to see a lot of these relationships either kind of crumble or develop.
Do you find out by the end who died and who survived, or you do?
Yeah, you're not left hanging.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. So, had you read anything by Margaret Kennedy before?
No, I'd never heard of her.
I guess I must have heard her name because I heard of her most favorite novel is The Constant Nymph, which was her second novel, and I think this one is near the end of her.
I believe this one is her 12th novel. Yeah,
The Constant Nymph was 1924, so 25 years before. Yeah. I've heard the title, so I must have heard her name, but that's it.
Yes.
So I just skimmed her Wikipedia 5 minutes ago, and what a literary family. So her first cousin is Joyce Carey. That's a British novelist who is a man, but his name is Joyce, and his famous book is The Horse's Mouth. I haven't read it, but his name is familiar to me. And her Margaret Kennedy's daughter and granddaughter both became novelists, but I've never heard of any of them. So let's see here.
I believe her granddaughter wrote something about her. I don't know if it was a biography.
That's right. I don't know what it was, but she wrote something about this novel, I think. She had two daughters and a son, and one of her daughters was the novelist Julia Burleigh. I've never heard of her. And she doesn't even appear to have her own Wikipedia page. So she didn't amount to too much. But then one of her granddaughters is Serena Mackesy. And I think that's the one who has written something or other about her grandmother. And she at least has her own Wikipedia page. And she has written books under her own name and also under a pseudonym, Alex Marwood, psychological thrillers. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
So a very literary family. This has been great.
Thank you.
Maybe your next appearance, you can recommend some novels from the island of Crete or something.
Ooh, I will definitely keep an eye out for that.
And we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I would like to welcome Amy from the Sydney area of Australia. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so great to meet Amy. Amy used to have, I hope she'll come back, but she used to have a booktube channel called Polly Reader. Her name is Polly Reader on everything else in social media. I'm going to put a link to her Goodreads, Instagram, and I used to follow her channel and glad to have reconnected with her this way. And you also have a podcast, Mother Other. Tell us about that for a minute.
Yes. So shortly after I fell away from BookTube, I became a mum. That's kind of why I fell off the BookTube bandwagon. And I started a podcast shortly after becoming a mum called Mother Other, because I wanted to talk to other people who have babies about how they sort of find ways to do things to hold on to their identity outside of motherhood. So that's kind of what it's about, not just being seen as a mother.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. Which makes me think of what's the book? Night Bitch. Have you read that?
No, but I've been meaning to. It sounds really good.
One of my guests on this series talked about it. So
very cool.
It would be a book right up your alley.
Mm.
And we are going to talk about a fairly new release from Australia. It came out in May, didn't it?
Yes, it is called
Covered.
Unsheltered. Oh, it's a bit dirty. That may be toddler hands on there, but yes, it's called Unsheltered. It's
by Clare Moleta.
Yes.
So tell us about it. Sounds very intriguing.
So it is basically a plausible, realist, dystopian landscape set in Australia. It's sort of like an eco-dystopia, like a climate fiction. That's sort of a term that's been thrown around a lot lately, and I really love reading climate fiction because it's kind of terrifying but so believable as well, like the bleak future that awaits us if we don't confront climate change.
Or that started last month.
Yeah, because it's set in Australia and we're doing nothing here. It's pretty full on. I read someone's Goodreads review that said it's the road, only better. Yeah, I mean, that's a big comment, right? The road is a classic, but I think it's true. And it's more relatable to me because it's about a mother who is desperate to find her child. She basically becomes separated from her child, and she's scrambling to find her in this horrendously unimaginable landscape of Australia where there's just catastrophic weather. They experience howlers, which I assume are like tornadoes, very regularly, and big dust storms where you can't breathe or see anything. And yeah, it's intense, but it was so thrilling and gripping that I read it very, very quickly.
Yeah, sounds like a very suspenseful story. Did it leave you feeling hopeless, hopeful?
There's a really unexpected ending, which I can't talk about because it will spoil the book.
Right.
But it was surprising, the ending. In terms of the climate change stuff, I think it's a good book to read to remind us to try harder, because I really did immediately start analyzing everything in my life that I was doing that wasn't really that helpful. And I think before I became a mum, I was a lot more conscious of doing everything I could to help with climate change. And then you sort of get swamped with all the daily tasks as a mum and things just slip to the wayside. It was a good wake-up call to try harder and to put in a bit more effort in little ways.
And how was the writing, the actual prose?
The writing was really, really good as well. And that's another reason why I loved it so much. I gave it 5 stars. I think maybe 4.5 if I could have, but Goodreads, only gives you one option. The writing is really intelligent, but also really easy to read. I guess that's a good way to put it.
And it is Clare Moleta's debut.
Yeah, and if it is, because I didn't know that, but that is shocking to me because it's really a masterpiece, I think.
What can you tell us about the author?
I don't know a lot about the author. I do know that she's a mother, which is how I sort of find my books these days, because I try to find mothers to talk to on the podcast. And I know that she has lived in New Zealand. She lives there currently, and she was raised in Western Australia. So she's quite familiar with the landscape of Australia. That's where the book is set as well, I believe, in Western Australia. Yeah.
So am I making the right conclusion that you're hoping to interview her for your podcast?
I would like to. I'm hoping to. I'm at this point right now where I have so many authors that I want to talk to, and I feel like I'm not quick enough to interview them directly after their books are being released, because there's so many amazing books coming out right now, and I'm obviously very busy, but I would really like to talk to her for this. Yeah.
Well, I think whenever you could make that happen, it would be very interesting. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to say about the book?
Well, I would like to say that the opening scene is really incredible, because that's kind of what set the whole book up for me. It's basically this couple standing outside on the street, and it's raining, and they're like running around ecstatic and like kissing in the rain, and you're sort of like, what's going on? And then their daughter runs out and she's 5, nearly 6, and she's never experienced rain before. That's the kind of climate they're in. So she's freaking out, like, oh, the rain, what's happening? Well, she's not saying the rain because she doesn't know what it is. And her parents are sort of like smiling at her, like, it's okay, this is a good thing, you know? And that was really shocking and intense to read, just like, oh, I hope this never happens to my children. I hope they get to experience rain throughout their life.
So that's the mother and daughter.
And the father at that point, yes.
And but the ensuing story focuses on the mother and daughter.
Yes. So a few things happen, but the main story arc is about a mother searching for her daughter. So I don't think I'm ruining it by saying anything about the dad not being really in the storyline. But one last comment is that I think it's also an interesting commentary on the way we treat refugees in Australia. Because basically the book is based on, it's called Unsheltered, right? So there's a part of Australia that's sheltered and then there's a part that's unsheltered. So the sheltered part is where everybody that is, I suppose, has money or has some kind of power lives. And then everybody else lives in the unsheltered part where the terrible weather is happening. So yeah, that's a bit more of an explanation of the basis of the book.
Has this shown up on some prize lists in Australia?
It has not.
Oh,
and I don't know why no one is talking about this book. That's something else I wanted to say, because a friend of mine read it first and she started posting about it going, why hasn't anyone been speaking about this book? And I realized I had it on my bedside. So thanks to Kaz for that. But yeah, it's really good. Highly recommend it.
Between your forthcoming, hopefully a forthcoming interview with the author on your podcast and this little chat on Bite-Sized Book Chats, we're going to change all that.
We are.
Thanks so much, Amy.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was great to chat.
It's great.